We had to pay those people really good money to say those things. We did. Just kidding. Only Rob Holler made us pay him money. Just kidding, Rob. I know you're watching this from Joshua Tree. Can we give it up for our online family just real quick? Can we just give it up for them? Thank you guys for tuning in, Rob and Brittany and the whole crew out there. Man, I like that video. That makes me feel good. If I'm ever having like a bad day, like have you ever been on the beach and a seagull drops a blessing on you? If I'm ever having a bad day, I'm just going to watch that video right there. But guys, I'm amped up today. It's, rained a little bit. You guys are still in church. I'm amped up. And so are you all right if I just jump right into the message today? Is that okay? Is that okay? I haven't had a Mountain Dew this morning. This is just water energy. This is what this is. But listen, I love my church. I just want to start out by saying I love my church. I love our church. I love this church. I love it so much. Now, you might hear that and you might be like, oh, the pastor's weird. We've got a weirdo in the room. And maybe you think it's weird to hear I love my church because maybe you're new to church. Maybe it's weird for you to hear I love my church because, well, you've been to a church before. Listen, I totally get that. But maybe it's weird for you all to hear I love my church, but it's not weird to hear we love other things or to say that we love other things. So I wanted to start out today by telling you the top 10 unimportant things that I love. So I just wanted to just put this out there. I'm going to go David Letterman on you. How many of you are old and you remember David Letterman? Who remembers David Letterman? Oh, yeah, top 10 list. Some of you are young and you don't know who David Letterman is. You're looking him up on TikTok right now. Some of you are old and you're like, what's David Letterman got to do with clocks? I don't understand. I don't have time to explain it. Anyway, but David Letterman used to do this top 10 list of things on his show. And so I'm going to go all David Letterman on you guys for a second and give you the top 10 unimportant things that I love. Now, if you love any of these things, I just need you to let me know. All right, you can just say, preach it, brother. You can say TikTok. You can say Joel Letterman. Whatever you have to say, but I just want to give you my top 10 list, and maybe you'll love some of these things. Number 10 unimportant thing I love is number 10. I love it when I wake up thinking it's time to get out of bed, but then realize I have 3 more hours to sleep. Is this not the greatest thing? That's the best. You're like, oh no, I got to wake up for work. And then you're like, I got 3 more hours. The Lord is good. So I love that. That's a fun one. Number 9, I love it when, now some of you Walmart grocery pickup people, who does Walmart grocery pickup? Okay, whoa, yeah, you're excited. I'm excited about that. We're going later today, baby. Woohoo, that's our date. Anyway, you'll get this if you do Walmart grocery pickup. I love it when Walmart grocery pickup substitutes Great Value Oreos with real Oreos for the great value price. My wife, listen, I don't really do Oreos, but my wife, she doesn't order Oreos. She orders Great Value Twist and Shouts. But when you order something on Walmart grocery pickup and they're out of their Twist and Shouts because everybody else is ordering the Twist and Shouts, they will give you real Nabisco Oreos for great value prices. And so what you do is you put everything on your list, Equate brand and Great Value brand. And then I promise you, you're going to be getting Nabisco products, Frito-Lay products, Oil of Olay, all the Olays, I don't know. Okay, so just a little insider tip if you're in the Walmart grocery pickup. Number 8, I love my kids' Halloween candy. Come on, every parent knows what I'm talking about. My kids are sitting in the room. They're like, what? Yeah, parent tax. That's it. Number 7, I love putting on freshly washed pants and reaching in the pocket and finding money. I find $1, I'm like, it's going to be a good day. $10, I'm like, the Lord is good. $20, I'm like, baby, load up. We're going to IHOP. Okay, we're going. Number 6, I love this YouTube video. Let's watch.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me. My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited
Is that not the greatest video on the entire internet? At the end where she's just, I don't know if that's the mom or the nanny, bless her heart. I feel bad for her, but she just got her head down like... And every parent feels good when you see other parents messing up. I just feel good about that. All right. Number 5, I love it when I drop my phone, pick it up, and the screen isn't broken. Woo! Yeah. Oh, yeah, you got plastic screens?
No, we have good tempered screens.
Good temper screens. All right, well, listen, we got our phones, we drop them. I've dropped my wife's phone. It's not, the screen's not broken. I'm like, woo! We're going to IHOP. We just saved $1,000 or whatever. Number 4, I love any tourist that sees a dolphin and yells, "Shark!" I love that. And anybody who's wearing like water shoes and a fanny pack. Like, I just think that's wonderful. I love to remind Steelers fans, Kristen Cordry, I don't know if you're in the room. I love to remind Steelers fans that the Ravens beat the Steelers the last time we faced each other in the playoffs. Woo! This is just NFL history. So I heard a hush over here. Oh, there it is. Kristen's in the back. Sorry. All right, number 2, I love to do the Jeep wave to Jeep drivers from my Honda Civic. I do this all the time. You can ask my wife. I just am like waving to them. And listen, I don't know if you drive a Jeep Wrangler or whatever. Nobody in a Jeep has ever waved back. Now, you guys got to get off your high horse. You need to wave to us Honda Civic people. But I'm going to start a movement where we're all just doing the Jeep wave to everybody, all right? Doesn't matter if you're in a Jeep or not. Number 1, I love dogs in people clothes. This is my dog wearing people's clothes right there. If it doesn't make you happy to see a dog in people's clothes, you have a very dark heart, all right? But how many of you love some unimportant things? Oh, there's a dog dressed up right now. There it is, right there in the room. See, you are like on. Don't you just love it? How many of you love some unimportant things? Anybody love something that's unimportant? Maybe you love cats in people's clothes. I don't know. I'm not sure. But if it's not weird to say I love dogs in people's clothes, it shouldn't be weird to say I love my church. And I do. I really do love my church. Now, some of you are like, well, of course you love the church. You're the pastor. You know, and the worship leader's name is Bo Dukes, so it's like the Dukes of Hazzard in here, okay? Like, and maybe you think I love this church because, like, you know, we have a staff now, or we've grown from 17 people 7 years ago to we've had over 400 people show up here on a weekend. Isn't that insane? It's insane. And so maybe you were thinking like, well, of course you love the church because, you know, it's grown or whatever. Listen, I loved this basement the very first time I walked in here in 2010, and we had ceiling tiles in this room. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh, this is a pretty cool basement. And then I saw like a water stain right over here in the ceiling tiles. It was about the size of a Jeep Wrangler. And I'm like, oh, that's a bad water stain. And then I heard this swoosh. I'm like, sounds like a toilet flushing. And that's when I located Casapula's plumbing pipes right here. How many of you have ever heard the plumbing pipes like swooshing? You thought the Lord was talking to you. No, it's the plumbing pipes. Like the very first visitor in our church was Casapula's plumbing pipes right here. But I love this church back in 2010. I love it when I came back here in 2013, and I was the only person on staff. So I was the plumber, I was the pastor, I was the door greeter, I was the prayer team, I was the church janitor, I was all those things. But over the last 10 years, I love what God's done in this church. We have these numbers up here, and they're on the bottom of my shirt. Over the last 7 years, actually, 465 people have started a relationship with Jesus here. I love that. 125 people have gotten baptized here in the last 10 years, the last 7 years. And I love this church before 10 years ago, before some of y'all even knew this church existed. I love this church when we had one campus out in Gumbro. If you're watching from Gumbro, that is the land of Scrapple. And I loved it back then. Listen, I love this church back then when we only had one campus because this church taught me about Jesus. This church, I got baptized down an old country road in Gumbro. Mr. and Mrs. Morris Daisy's house, and it was at a Bayshore baptism party when I was like 10 years old. I got baptized through this church. I met and married my wife in our church. Woo! Which means we are the original ChristianMingle.com. So if you're single, get to mingling. All right, this is a great place. You got the pastor's approval. But I do. I love this church. And I don't love it because we've grown. I don't love it because, we have a lobby that looks like the Apple Store out there. I love our church because I love our Savior. And 2,000 years ago, Jesus showed up. And 2,000 years ago, they nailed Jesus to the cross. 3 days later, he walked out of a grave alive. And he told 120 of his closest followers, hey, go tell everybody. And Jesus himself started this movement called the local church. And I just believe that the local church is the hope of the world because Jesus himself started the local church and Jesus has been and will always be the hope of the world. And so I love my church. And so I'm going to just give you 3 reasons I love my church today. And some of this kind of like lines up with week 2. And so some of this will be a little bit of like overlap, but I think it's just kind of good to hear this stuff over and over again. So number 1, I love my church because there's hope for everyone here. There's hope for everyone here. Now, did you know every family has one weird person in it? Did you know this? How many of you know there's a weird person in your family? Let me see your hands if you know that. Listen, I love doing that because every time somebody looks at the person next to them, like, some people are subtle, like it's them. Other people just look right at it, like you're the weird one, right? And some of you are like, I don't think that I have a weird person in my family. Yeah, you do. You're it, okay? You're the one. You're the one. When I was a kid growing up, I always thought my Granny Jones was the weird person in my family. And the reason I thought Granny Jones was a weird person in my family, because Granny Jones had an outhouse in her yard, and she had bats living in her attic. And so when we would go over there, I'd be like, why does Granny Jones have like a permanent porta potty in her yard? And why does she live with bats? And when you go to Granny Jones' house, she used to have a rooster. And a rooster was wild. She didn't think it was wild, but it was wild because it would chase me around the yard. And so it was like Stephen King movie situation over Granny Jones' house. And so I always thought Granny Jones was the weird one in the family because she lived with bats. And then in 1989, a Michael Keaton movie came out called Batman. How many of you remember this version of Batman? With Jack Nicholson as the Joker? Does it get any better than that? And now I was a preacher's kid growing up. I was not allowed to watch this movie, so I did what every good preacher kid does. I snuck over to my friend Kurt's house and I watched it over there. And I watched Batman, and all of a sudden I thought Granny Jones was like Batman. I'm like, Granny Jones, she's not weird. She's awesome. She's like a superhero that just happens to have bats living up in her attic. And so I was all about Granny Jones, and after 1989, and I used to think Granny Jones was weird, but then I thought, Granny Jones, she's brave. She lives with bats. But then, you just need to know this about Granny Jones. She wasn't afraid to live with bats, but she was afraid of the IRS taking her money. Now, some of you are like, preach it, Granny Jones. Me too. But she was terrified of the IRS taking her money, okay? And so my dad, now some of you know who my dad is. He's our lead pastor. He oversees all of our campuses. My dad, and that was his grandmother, he one time prank called Granny Jones and pretended to be an IRS agent. Our lead pastor, listen, do not do this to the elderly, okay? Don't do this. And so he called her, and this is what he did. He called, and Granny Jones answered her rotary phone in her bat-filled house. And she said, hello. And he said, is Mary Jones there? And she said, this is her. And then my dad said, oh, well, this is Dan from the IRS. We need to talk about your money. And Granny Jones, true story, she hung up the phone. My dad called right back to tell her it was a joke. She did not answer the phone for the rest of the day. We had to send a family member over to Granny Jones's house to tell her it was a prank. All right, she was so freaked out, okay? And so the point of the story is my dad's the weird one in the family. No, the point of the story is my Granny Jones, she got creeped out by somebody who would, like an IRS agent. Somebody, if you were in the IRS, like that just creeped you out. Now, if you work for the IRS, we're glad you're here. Welcome to church. But I tell you that because There's certain people who creep us out, right? I mean, it might be that one weird person in your family. It might be somebody who works for the IRS, okay? It could be your husband who creeps you out because, your hair moved from your head to your back, okay? I don't know. But everybody is creeped out by somebody. Isn't that true? Now, in the Bible, that somebody was tax collectors. Tax collectors creeped everybody out. Now, just so you know, a tax collector was a Jewish person who worked for the Roman government, which was the enemy. A tax collector was a Jewish person who worked for the enemy to steal money from their own people, to steal money from Jewish people. And so it was like the IRS and the mob kind of together. Not good, all right? And so everybody was creeped out by tax collectors, all right? Even if you were like a mean person back in the day, in Jesus' day. If you were mean to little puppies, you would see a tax collector and be like, you need to knock that off. That's just messed up. All right, and so tax collectors, I told you 3 weeks ago, they weren't even allowed in the church. And so say this with me, tax collectors were hopeless. All right, so they were hopeless. So that's where we pick up. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 9, it says this, as Jesus went on from there, he saw, everybody say he saw. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Now, why was Matthew at the tax collector's booth? Because Matthew was a tax collector right there. And Matthew gave everybody the creeps. Like if you ran into Matthew in the grocery store, like maybe you're going down like the soup aisle, and Matthew came down the other end of the soup aisle, that's when you would be like, oh, look at Oh, it's the tofu section. We've got some twist and shout tofu edition. Okay. And like you would avoid Matthew in the grocery store. How many of you ever avoided somebody in the grocery store? Come on. These are the honest people in the room, all right? But Matthew creeped everybody out. But Jesus saw Matthew. Why? Why, Jesus? Why? Because nobody has ever been too hopeless for Jesus. Nobody has ever been too far gone for Jesus. Now, you might say, well, you can't get that from he saw, Pastor Joel. Like that's a bit of a stretch. So let's just keep looking at the story. This is the whole verse of verse 9. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at a tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. Follow me. I think Jesus' followers were like, wait, Jesus, have you seen Matthew's Instagram account? Like you don't want him to follow you, okay? He only posts pictures of like steaks from 1776 because he's stealing all our money, and he's at 1776 every night. They call him medium rare Matthew over there. He's there all the time. You don't want like creeper Matthew following you, do you? And Jesus said, follow me. And of course, like Matthew's probably not going to follow Jesus because these are like two totally different types of people. But it says Matthew got up and what? Creepy Matthew followed Jesus, and Jesus asked creepy Matthew to follow him? Now, let me ask you this. How many parents in the room have a kid that still lives at home, or kids that still live at home? And even though they're 35, that counts. You're like, okay. All right, if you have kids who live at home, you'll get this, all right? I feel like all I do anymore as a parent is say two things. Stop it. That's it. Listen, if you're about to have a kid, I don't know where Cotter's in the back. Okay, listen, if you're about to, you can read all the books on parenting you want to read. You can watch all the YouTube videos on parenting you want to watch. All you need to know is how to say stop it. That's all you're going to do. It's just like my boy Nixon, all right, he loves to go over across to a little old lady's house across from our house, and he likes to go in her front yard, and he likes to dig for worms in her front yard every day. And I've been saying, Nixon, stop it. You can't, no, she doesn't like that. No, stop. She's going to call the IRS. Like, stop it. Don't do that. I feel like I'm at a 3,700 count of saying stop it. But Nixon has found about 3,700 worms. So he ain't stopping, all right? But I feel like every day I just am saying, stop it. Now, back to the story. If I'm Jesus, which I'm not, my wife will tell you, I am not Jesus. But if I'm Jesus, I'm telling Matthew, the tax collector, stop it. Not follow me, right? But Jesus said, follow me. Jesus could have had the ministry of stop it. He could have just like walked in here and been like, stop it. Definitely stop it. Okay, I know what you all did 10 years ago. Stop it. Some of you're going to go to fire. I saw what you did at Firefly. Stop it. You love birds in the back. You know what you're going to do later on? Like, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. Like, Jesus could have had the ministry of stop it. Some of you have been to that church, right? The Stop It Church. But you just need to know this about our church. We don't need people to stop what they're doing in order to come here. We just need to get people here and get them around Jesus. And Jesus is the one who will change them from who they are into who they need to be. Jesus knew if I can just get Matthew around me, if I can just get him around me, he will start to change. If that was good enough for Jesus, that is good enough for us. And Jesus gave Matthew the tax collector hope. And I love my church because there is hope for everyone. Because if there's hope for Matthew the tax collector, there is hope for every one of us. And if you walked in here today feeling hopeless, I don't know what your situation would be, but if you walked in here feeling hopeless, I want you to hear Jesus saying, hey, follow me, just spend time with me, and I will be your hope. Because Jesus gives hope to everyone, including Matthew the tax collector. Here's the second reason I love my church. Because Jesus gave us, that's the church, permission to do wild stuff. Now, some of you are like, he gave me permission to do wild stuff? That's all I need to hear. I'm out here, Pastor Joe, I'm going to have a good night. Hold on, let me explain this before you go anywhere with this. How many of you have ever been in an uncomfortable situation? Anybody ever been in an uncomfortable situation? Some are like, I'm in one right now. I'm in church. Okay. No, listen, you've been in an uncomfortable situation. If you've ever been in a Walmart on a Saturday, you've been in an uncomfortable situation. But we've all been in uncomfortable situations. I want to tell you a story about an uncomfortable situation. I've told this story before. I love this story. It could be a little offensive to some of you, but it's one of my favorite stories. I heard this pastor tell this story one time, and he was the pastor of a really big church. His church was so big, like they were on national TV, and so they would like film the services. And if you were sitting in the front row of the service, okay, Amy, if you're sitting in the front row of the service, you were going to be on TV. All right, now we don't do crowd shots in our church because you all will be sleeping. Okay, so we don't want to put that on the Facebooks. All right, so but in this church, they did crowd shots. You were on the front row. You were going to be in the shot. All right. Now, there was a guy who always went to this church. He always sat on the front row. And for years, he had been asking his friend to come with him to church. And his friend was not a church person. And his friend was like, no, stop it. Stop asking me to go to church. And finally, this friend got worn down, and he decided to go to church with the guy who had invited him. And so the Sunday morning came, and the guy went to go pick up his friend to bring him to church for the first time. He goes to his house. The guy walks out of his house to come to church for the first time. He's wearing a black shirt with neon letters on his shirt. And his shirt said, and this is the part that could be offensive, crazy mother beep. How do y'all know what I was going to say? You've been on that TikTok, probably. But his shirt said that. Now listen, imagine you've been inviting somebody to church forever. And then you go pick them up. They finally agree to come to church, and they walk out the door, and their shirt says "crazy mother beep" on it. What are you going to do? Well, you know, a lot of people are like, "Oh, listen, what I'll be doing, on my way in, we would stop by the Dollar General. I get them one of those like limited edition long neck Delaware T-shirts, you know, get him to wear that." In other words, like we have to change this. Okay, we can't let him come into church the way that he is. Now, when you say it that way, it kind of reframes it a little bit. But if that person were to walk in here, some of you might get nervous. Might be like, well, what are we going to do? Pastor Joel, what do we do? Should we tell Butch? I'm going to tell Butch, okay? But some of us will work really hard to not let that person come into church the way that they are. But this guy was like, listen, he's already in my car. I'm just going to take him to church. We're going to go to church. And this guy always sat on the front row. And so they come to church, and this guy wearing this shirt, they're sitting on the front row of this church that is on national TV. And so the music starts, and this guy doesn't know anything about church, and the music is really loud at this church. And so the guy with the shirt, he's like, he thought he's at a rock concert. He's like starting to jump around. He's like moving around. The pastor looks over at him. He's like, oh, that guy really is a crazy mother. And then the pastor gets up to speak. And this guy on the front row with that shirt on, he leans in the whole time. And at the end of the message, that guy gave his life to Jesus. Isn't that a crazy story? Now, we get kind of excited. I get kind of excited about that. But my question for you is this: what will we do? Will we let that guy come and sit in the front row of our church? And then let me just say this, and the longer you've been a Jesus follower, the more this is going to make you uncomfortable. But I believe that Jesus would have drove that guy to church himself and sat on the front row with that person. That's what I believe. Because Jesus was willing to do the wildest stuff to reach the wildest people. Now, let me tell you where I get that from. This is in Matthew chapter 9, verse 10. So we got Matthew the tax collector. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house? Well, wait. The creepy guy who ripped everybody off like the worst of the worst, he's having dinner at this guy's house, and many tax collectors and sinners came to eat with who? Him, which is Jesus and his disciples. Wait. Is Jesus at a wild party with a bunch of wild people? He's at the same guy who, like, I see looks all holy and all these like pictures at Granny Jones's house. Like, he's at a wild party. But Jesus was willing to do wild things to reach wild people, because Jesus was willing to do anything short of sin to reach people who are far from him, and so are we as a church. Which is why like we do some wild things around here. Like 3 weeks ago, we gave away like Bayshore. We gave away like 200 free Bayshore shirts. They're limited edition, long neck Delaware shirts, okay? Well, that's why we do like on party like it's baptism weekend. That's coming up in September. We're trying to get the Hopkins ice cream truck here. Some of you are like, wait, I wasn't going to come to that, but what's the date? The Lord just spoke to me. I'm going to be here. It's why our band like does openers sometimes. Like a few months ago, Bo Dukes turned into James Brown. And he was like, I feel good. Remember that? I love that. You killed that, by the way. And you might be like, wait, is that one of them there secular songs? And my answer to that is no. Listen, Jesus didn't die to save music. Jesus died to save people, because people have a soul. And Jesus was willing to go anywhere short of sin to reach people who are wild. And so that's what we're going to do as a church. And it's kind of funny. If you want a little more of reasoning why we can do this, if you look in Acts chapter 17, the Apostle Paul quoted secular poetry to reach people who are far from God. And so if the Apostle Paul can quote secular poetry to reach people who are far from God, we can sing a little James Brown to reach for hope with beach people. And so Jesus was always willing to do anything short of sin to reach wild people. Now, speaking of wild people, I remember Butch's first Sunday that came here. You know I love you, Butch. Butch, his first Sunday here, we were doing a series called At the Movies. And that particular Sunday was Rocky Sunday. And the band opened that service with the Rocky theme song, Eye of the Tiger. And so, like, you have Butch walking in our church for the very first time, down the middle aisle, and it's like, and which I think is the most appropriate song for Butch's first Sunday here. Like, if the Lord isn't in that, I don't know, you know. And Butch is looking around like, this is a weird church right here. And it was strange to him. But listen, Butch has been in the front row almost every Sunday since. And after that service, a few months later, we had our big baptism service, and Butch invited his teenage son named Eric, who didn't believe in God. He was an atheist. In fact, that morning he said, I believe science, not God. He came to church for the very first time. Well, maybe not the first time, but he came to church and our baptism Sunday, and he got saved in that service, and we have a picture of him getting baptized the very same day he claimed he was an atheist. Isn't that a cool story? And Butch got baptized here too a while later. Here's Butch's picture. Butch is in the Superman, and I'm pretty sure that's the Superman pose. I'm not judging, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is. But listen, we're willing to do wild things because Jesus gave us permission to. And because it works. And religious people, this always kind of like freaks religious people out, which is not new, okay? This is what happens in the very next verse. You know, Jesus, he goes to this party with all these like wild people and religious people. They don't know what he's doing. And the Pharisees. Now, anytime you see when the Pharisees, or you see the word Pharisees in the Bible, you should just hear Jaws music. Like, dun-na, dun-na. Dun-na, 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 dun-na. Okay, because the Pharisees, these are the people who killed Jesus. All right, so we're going to practice. When the Pharisees, dun-na, 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 dun-na. Okay, that's good. You guys got it. Okay, when the Pharisees saw what? Jesus at this wild party, they asked his disciples, why? Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? And my takeaway from this is that religious people have never understood the agenda of Jesus. But just so you understand our agenda, we are willing to do anything short of sin to reach people who are far from God, because that was always Jesus' agenda, and that will always be our agenda, and that's why I love my church. And I look out here and I see Butch, and that's a proof that we can do wild things to reach good people like Butch. And so I love my church because of that. Last thing is this. I love my church because Jesus does wild things in us here. He does wild things in us here. Now, I'm going to say something that is probably going to make me lose some friends. All right? Bo and Butch may not like this, okay? But I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to put all my cards on the table. I think women are smarter than men. Women, do you agree? Do you agree? See, you're smart. Okay, so there you go. No, I think women are smarter than men. Here's why. I've never seen a woman at a football game wearing a helmet with 2 beer cans attached to it. Have you? I have never seen a woman trying to carry in 75 bags of groceries into the house at the same time. I have never seen a woman putting her head in a crocodile's mouth on YouTube. Only men do that, okay? Women, you are smart. You're smart because if you have a problem or something's going on, you'll be like, hey, I got a problem, or I got this going on. Listen, men, we don't do that. We could have a crocodile clamping down on our head, and we'd be like, I'm all right. I'm good. It doesn't even hurt that bad. Could you get my camera and videotape this, please? Right? How many men, you have a hard time admitting you're hurt or you have a problem? Come on, man, come on. See, this is 3 people, and even you guys are like, I don't know. We don't want to admit we have a problem. Listen, I just proved my point. Some of you are catching up. Anyway, let me give you an example. I remember years ago, I was surfing over here at the Indian River Inlet, and it was in March. The waves were really, really big, and this really big wave came in. Biggest wave of the day came in, and I was in like the worst spot possible because it was going to land like 10 feet in front of me, and there was nothing that I could do. And so I just threw my board when the wave was coming in. I just dove down as deep as I could, and the wave like landed on me, and it picked me up, and I hit the bottom of the ocean floor like Drago hit Rocky in Rocky IV. Like, it was just like I nailed the bottom of the ocean floor, and I'm like, I'm good. I'm fine. And I literally had to like crawl up onto the beach, and my brother was up there, and he's like, you're not fine. We're driving you to the emergency room right now. And I'm like, no, I'm good. And I almost passed out on the way to the emergency room because I separated my clavicle from my sternum. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, don't do it. But I got to the emergency room, and they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm pretty good. And then I sneezed. And I'm 99% sure I didn't say a cuss word. I'm 100% sure I thought one. Okay, it hurt so bad. And so they gave me this sling, and they said, Mr. Tice, don't do any physical activity for 3 months. I was like, got it. And I didn't do any physical activity for 1 week. Okay, like none. A week went by, and I'm like, I think I'm fine. And so I started getting ready to go to the gym. And my wife, who's way smarter than me, she was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just going to go to the gym and run on the treadmill, 4 miles, using my legs, not my sternum. And she's like, that's a bad idea. And I was thinking, you don't know. I mean, you're a nurse, but I'm a pastor. Like, you don't know. I went to the gym, and I got on that treadmill because I was like, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. And listen, I'm 99% sure I didn't say a cuss word. But I'm 100% not sure I thought. Like, it hurt so bad, all right? And so, men, one more time, how many of you have a problem admitting you have a problem? Again, there we go. We haven't gotten any further in this. But I got some news for you. We all got a little problem. We're all a little sick. Some of you in the online family are like, my husband, he's sick. He's watching this wearing his beer helmet right now. He's watching church online wearing his beer helmet. Okay, please take a picture of that for us. Send it in. But we're all a little sick. Now let's go back to the story. You got Jesus. He's at this wild party with a bunch of wild people, and also church people. And this is what Jesus says at the party. So he just kind of like has a moment. He stands up and he says this: "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Now, turn to the person next to you, if you know them, and say, you're sick. And if you enjoy that, that's proof that you're sick, okay? But Jesus said it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. And he says this, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Now, Matthew, you know what Matthew could have done? Because this is at Matthew's house. Matthew could have been like, wait, hold on, Jesus. You're going to come to my party. You're going to roll up to my house. You're going to eat my food. You're going to drink my wine. Or if you're Baptist, my grape juice. Just kidding. That's going to get me in trouble. Anyway, and you're going to call us sick? Like, that's what Matthew could have said. But Matthew knew, hey, we're all sick. So I got good news and bad news. What do you want to hear first? Good news or bad news? Bad news. Okay, here's the bad news. You're a sick sinner. Welcome to Bayshore, where we like to make you feel good about yourself. But you're a sick sinner. Here's the good news is, Jesus is the doctor, and this church is his emergency room. This is his ER. And so this is the right place to be. And so I want you to know, if you're willing to say, hey, I'm sick, I got a problem, and you keep showing up here, look, that's when wild things happen in us, because it is a spiritual impossibility to keep coming to church week after week after week after week and not change. I hear so many stories from you guys telling me what Jesus has done in your life through this church. I've had people come up to me who are addicted to pills, who are addicted to drugs, and they've said to me, Joel, because of this church, I am now clean. I've had people come up to me whose marriages were over, and I don't mean like they were on the rocks, like they were turning the rocks in. And they've come to me and said, Joel, because of this church, my marriage is in the best place it's ever been. I had a lady come to me a few weeks ago right here, and she said, Joel, it was in this church that I realized that I was an alcoholic, and I just want to tell you I am now celebrating 2 years sober. She told me that right here. I had somebody else tell me, send me a message last week who said, Joel, if I didn't find this church last year, I wouldn't be here. I would have taken my life. But that person was telling me that because they were still alive. And it's wild. It's wild what God will do in our life when we just keep showing up to church and we say, hey, I have a problem. All right. And the first step to healing is admitting, I got a problem. But Jesus does amazing things in us when we'll just come to him and say, hey, I've got an issue. Will you help me? And if you have a mess going on in your life, Jesus will never leave you if you reach out to him. I've told this before, but this is one of my favorite stories as well. When my daughter was little, this story happened when my daughter was little. I remember one night, Stacy and I, we were asleep. It was in the middle of the night. And I heard something going on in the living room. And I thought we were being robbed or something. And so I rolled over and I said, Stacy, can you check on that? Just kidding. I wouldn't tell you if I actually said that. But I thought we were getting robbed. And so Stacy made me go look at it and see what's going on. So I go out to the living room and it was dark. It was the middle of the night. And I opened up the door and I looked in the living room and I could see my daughter Nora in the living room, but I couldn't see her well. So I flipped on the lights. And when I flipped on the lights, I could see that Nora had gotten sick. And like sick. Now, I'm not going to go into detail because you might be a sympathy vomiter. And if I tell you, you might throw up, and then the person next to you might throw up, and then we'll all start throwing up, and nobody's going to love the church, okay? So, but I'll just say this. Nora had gotten sick on the carpet, on the rug. She got sick on the couch. She got sick all over her pajamas. And when I flipped on the light and I saw all that, it kind of grossed me out. But she looked at me and she said, Daddy, help me. I got sick. Now, let me tell you what I didn't say. I didn't say, Daddy? Who are you calling Daddy? Listen, why don't you clean up the carpet? Clean up the couch, because that's where I sit when I watch the Ravens play. Okay, and you can clean up the couch, clean up your pajamas, and once you get yourself all cleaned up and everything around you cleaned up, then maybe I'll you can call me Daddy. Did I say that? No. When she said, Daddy, I got sick, I ran over to her, scooped her up, got all her sickness, it got all over me, which I'm okay, but I'm picking her up. I ran her to the bathroom. I started cleaning it up off of her. I got her a new pair of pajamas. I got her all set up, and then I just wiped off, around her mouth. I just got her all cleaned up, and then I just sat there and held her because she was shaking. And my love for my daughter is bigger than the mess that she made. And I just want you to know that you have a Heavenly Father whose love for you is bigger than the mess you made. The price Jesus paid is bigger than the mess you made. And when you say, hey, Jesus, I'm sick, Jesus is like, good news, your doc's in. I'm here. And so I love my church because we are a church for messy people. But the news is, we're all messy. Especially this section, okay? Like... in the back. I don't know. That's some of my family. So anyway. But Jesus does wild things in us when we say, hey, I need help. And I could tell you like 100 different stories of how like this church has helped change different people, but I'll just end with this by asking you a question. And if you're new, you don't have to answer this question, but if you've been here for a while, if Jesus has done anything good in your life through this church, anything positive has happened in your life, any changes you've had in your life because of this church, would you just raise your hand? Look around. I love my church because he's done wild things in you. He's done wild things in you. He's done wild things in you. Like all of you all just raise your hand. I love that about my church. And so we've celebrated 10 years together. But let me just tell you, church, I love that the next 10 years, Jesus is going to continue to change life after life after life after life after life after life. And I believe the best is still ahead for our church. And so buckle up, because when you keep showing up here, Jesus is going to keep doing wild things in your life. When you keep showing up here, it's going to do what there's going to be wild things that happen in our church, good things that happen in our church. When you keep showing up here, I believe Rehoboth Beach starts to change. And I love my church because I believe the local church is the hope of the world, because Jesus himself started a local church, and Jesus has been and will always be the hope of the world. I love you guys. Let me pray with you. Jesus, I'm thankful that you go to this party and you invite Matthew to follow you. And God, I just think there's so many layers to this that sometimes we just read over and we skip over, but you called Matthew to follow you. And you saw Matthew, and you were willing to do wild things to reach a crowd that nobody else was reaching, that the religious people didn't understand, and they asked why, but you went right into that. And God, I pray that we'll always be the church that does that. I pray that we'll always be the church that looks at people no matter who they are or what they walk in wearing. I pray that we'll look at them and we'll see someone who is a son and daughter of you, and not see somebody that we need to change, but somebody that you can change. And so, God, I just pray that we'll always do that, and everybody will always feel welcome here. We love you so much. In your name, amen.